Welcome, midnight listeners. Tonight we drift into a chapter of history that most would rather forget. There is a map you once saw faded ochre lines on animal skin, its edges frayed like dried lips. The land it shows is unmistakably North America, but far too early. The script is medieval Latin, the coastlines oddly confident, and in the northern part, cradled beneath a sweep of frozen fjords and dark pine, is a name you remember because it sounds like something you almost dreamed. Vinland. You're told it was a mistake, an exaggeration by Norse sailors drunk on possibility, that it was just a misheard word or a trick of memory carried too far west. But if that were true, why does it appear on dozens of maps across centuries drawn by men who never met each other, who couldn't have colluded yet, all mark that same impossible place? You blink and realize it's not just the maps. It's the stories, the coins, the wood shavings from a tree that doesn't grow in Europe, the sagas whispered in icebound halls that describe grapes growing wild on foreign shores, and always the name. Before we drift deeper, consider marking this video for those who fall asleep best beside forgotten truths. Subscribe if you return nightly to the quiet horror of history. Let me know your local time, and if you're still awake at the end. Now exhale and let history's cold breath settle on your skin. You begin with the first account, a Norse text known as the Saga of the Greenlanders. It tells of a voyage led by Leif Erikson around the year 1000. The tale is blurred at the edges like smoke, but certain phrases stand out: fertile land, wild wheat salmon-filled rivers, and Vin interpreted by some as wine, land of wine, Vinland. But here the silence begins. No permanent settlement, no government record, no lineage, just passing mention. Ships arrive, stay a few seasons, then leave. The land is too hostile or too distant or too cursed. No one agrees, no one explains. Yet what chills you isn't what was written, it's what followed. In 1070, Adam of Bremen, writing from Germany, describes Vinland in alarming clarity, though he never visited. He claims Danish sailors told him of it, an abundant place west of Greenland, where grapes and grain grow wild. His account is treated seriously by many in Europe, so seriously that cartographers begin including Vinland on their world maps. You study the 15th century Skálholt map drawn in Iceland. There it is again, Vinland placed with unsettling precision, far too accurate for what should be a fable. It's not floating in the margins or adorned with sea monsters like a cautionary tale. It's real, measured, labelled. Why you look deeper? A coin unearthed in Maine, Norse in origin, authentic, carbon dated to around 1000 AD, found in the layers where no Viking is supposed to have set foot. It's dismissed, of course. A trade artifact, brought over through many hands, but you've heard this dismissal before. It's always the same voice, calm, academic, tired of ghosts. In 1960, archaeologists finally confirm a Norse site in Newfoundland, Lars, or Meadows. Real turf houses, iron nails, a spindle, a forge, and you think here is proof. But then curiously, the academics pull back. They call it a seasonal camp, temporary, not Vinland, not really. You keep reading. Vinland, they say, was farther south. Vinland was a rumour. Vinland was misremembered. The grapes were just gooseberries. The sagas were metaphor. The coins were traded, the maps were copied. The runes were hoaxes. The settlement was short-lived. They explain everything. Quietly, sensibly, but never entirely. What they never explain is why the stories persisted for 500 years. Why fishermen in Bristol in the 14th century spoke of lands west of Ireland they dared not name, why bishops in Greenland sent letters to Vinland in the 1200s, then stopped without reply, why the papacy briefly considered sending a mission there. You find a 15th century Venetian map. Its ink has flaked in places, but the name remains Vinlanda Insula. And you feel a weight in your chest, because this is no backwater sketch. It's from men who mapped the known world, and they included it. You lie awake listening. You begin to wonder if the chilling part isn't that Vinland might not have existed. It's that maybe it did, and something made it disappear. So now you're asking a question that the academics don't like. If Vinland was found, who or what removed it? And perhaps the darker question, did someone make sure it was forgotten? You sit with this thought for a long while. The fire crackles. A forgotten world lies just across the water. You turn your attention to the Skraelings the native peoples described in the sagas. Their name was not kind, nor clear. It was a Norse word of scorn, maybe fear. They were said to be short, dark-haired, fierce, hostile, but something about the descriptions doesn't add up. According to the sagas, the Norse outnumbered the Skraelings in the beginning. They had iron weapons, armor ships. They held the high ground, and yet they were driven back, again and again, not just by arrows and ambushes, but by fear, terrible growing fear, as if something about the land itself refused to let them stay. You find a passage that lingers in your throat. No man who has tasted of Vinland's water may rest easy again. No historian quotes it. It's not in school books, but it exists buried in a 17th century Icelandic transcription that was never widely translated. You wonder who wrote that and what they saw. Some suggest the Norse misunderstood local burial rites, that they camped near sacred ground and what followed was vengeance. Not war, not hatred, just correction. The land belonged to someone else and it wasn't for sale. But others hint at something deeper. You read about the Hop expedition, another saga tale. The Norse build homes, harvest grapes, even raise cattle. They laugh, they relax. Until one morning a Norseman is found dead. No blood, no wound, just gone. The sagas don't elaborate, they move on. But it happens again. A shadow in the trees, a scream during the night, a boat that never returns. Eventually they burn the settlement and leave. It's the burning that troubles you, because Vikings didn't waste wood, didn't burn boats, buildings, resources, unless they believed something had fouled the land, spiritually, or worse. You blink. It's suddenly quiet in the room. You remember something else, the bishop. Yes, Bishop Erik Gnupsson, sometime around 1121. He left Greenland to seek out Vinland. He never returned, nor did his letters, nor the church that reportedly sent him. It was as if the voyage unhappened. One scholar suggests something chilling, that Vinland wasn't merely abandoned, it was erased, from memory, from language, from prayer. That the settlers who escaped swore an oath to never speak of what they saw again. You scoff until you realize how little was written, how abrupt the silence is, how even in Norse culture, where sagas were passed down through generations, Vinland was an unfinished sentence. You stare at the timeline. The Norse reach North America before Columbus. They find land, grapes, timber, fresh water. They leave, and they never come back. Why you check Lance O Meadows again? You remember the artifacts, the loom weights, the cooking pits, a single broken cloak pin. But there's something else. A piece of wood shaped and carved with tools foreign even to Norse craftsmanship. Birch, but not the kind found in Newfoundland. Where did it come from? The archaeologists don't answer. They label it culturally ambiguous, which you now understand means we don't know, or we won't say. Outside the known site, satellite imaging shows strange patterns underground. Long straight lines too uniform for nature, but no digs are planned. Funding is cut. The sites remain buried, as if someone has decided there is nothing more to find. But you're not so sure. Because if Vinland was found but not kept, if it was marked on maps but then scratched away, then maybe what the Norse discovered wasn't a paradise. Maybe it was a mistake, and someone has been trying to cover it up ever since. You close the old book. On the inside cover is a scribbled phrase, half faded: "Not all lands are meant to be remembered." You return to the maps. Old ones, faded parchment, strange contours, lines that don't match known geography. Some show a coast west of Greenland far longer than Newfoundland. Some show entire settlements with names. Not Vinland, but things like Hopstramfjord Krossanes. Others show only crosses, or black ink blots where a place name used to be. You wonder if someone scraped it off. You wonder why. In one, there's a small note in the margins. Latin: Terram non tangas. Do not touch the land. Who wrote that when, and what did they see? You dig deeper. Not in archives now, but in the margins of other stories. Oral traditions, native legends, Wampanoag tales that predate Columbus by centuries. Some speak of pale men who came with fire steel and terror in their eyes. Some speak of a sickness not of the body, but of the soul. Men who refused to sleep indoors, who cried out in languages no one knew to gods who didn't answer. One tells of a village burned not by invaders, but by its own people. After a stranger came from the north and would not stop digging, you begin to piece together a different map, not of roads or rivers, but of disappearance. Everywhere the Norsemen landed, they vanished. A few graves remain, a few twisted rings of metal, but no bones, no saga of return, only silence. And then you find the stone. It's mentioned only briefly in a 19th century Swedish folklorist's notebook. He found it on the coast of Labrador, buried in sand, half swallowed by the tide. A flat red slab, 10 runes across it, unmistakably Norse. He copied them down before a storm hit. The stone was lost, but the translation, you stare at it. We fled south. The air screamed. That's it. No names, no dates, just that. You reread it 5 times. The air screamed. Was it a storm? A sound something worse? Was it myth or madness? You flipped through reports of other missing groups. The Norse in Greenland thriving 1 century gone the next. Whole farms abandoned. Boats intact but no one to sail them. Livestock wandering free. One house still had soup in the pot. Vinland wasn't the only mystery. It was just the first. You stumble across a theory, the sound curse, an old Icelandic belief that certain lands held deep echoes frequencies not meant for human ears. Places where the air itself turned hostile, whispers that filled your head even in dreams. Linguists dismiss it. Folklore, they say, superstition. But you think about that rune again. We fled south. The air screamed. And then you notice something in a 2023 geological survey. A minor blip. Seismic activity recorded off Newfoundland's coast. Not earthquakes, not tides, but a hum. Constant. Low frequency. Impossible to localize. They call it unexplained georesonance. You try to listen to the data online. You turn the volume down almost immediately. It hurts. You stare at the screen for a long time. And then you ask the question no historian dares to. What if Vinland is still there? not as a site, not as ruins, but as something waiting, something listening. You realize you're not alone in asking. A few researchers have gone silent after brief expeditions to unexplored coastal ridges. One reported strange magnetic effects. Another claimed his team became violently ill after approaching a particular grove. No conclusive findings, no peer-reviewed papers, just whispers. Just like before, you sit back. You remember how many times history has lost a truth because it was too terrifying to keep. Because some stories are safer untold, and maybe Vinland was one of them. You think about the phrase again, not all lands are meant to be remembered. But what if the land remembers us? You wake from dreams you didn't remember falling into. A shoreline, windless. A forest that breathes without sound. Something is buried beneath the moss and it's listening. You shake it off, return to your notes. You try to be rational scientific, but something about Vinland defies that. It resists clarity. Like the closer you get, the more it dissolves. There's a photo that haunts you, taken by a private expedition in 2004. It was never published, just passed, hand to hand, between researchers until it ended up in a forgotten FTP archive. It's not even labeled Vinland, just Site Alpha. Do not return. The photo shows three things: a coastline, a circle of stones, and a line carved into a tree behind them, deep, jagged, too sharp for time to have weathered it naturally. It says, "We watched them kneel to it." No one knows who wrote that. No one knows what it is. You follow a trail of obscure blogs, deleted threads, strange message boards, where anonymous accounts speak of echo places, regions where sensory data warps. GPS fails. Compasses spin. Sound becomes unreliable. A linguist from Oslo once speculated that Vinland was an early encounter with an acoustic anomaly, a naturally occurring distortion field that alters human perception. He died in 2011. Boat crash, no survivors. The final entry in his journal. Just 3 words, it spoke back. You go back to the runes. Why did they stop writing? The sagas, the proud Viking tradition of recording everything, break off the moment Vinland begins. Not just disappear, but recoil. One manuscript found in Iceland around 1470 refers to lands forbidden to the breath of men. That's not poetic language, that's fear. You dig into indigenous lore again. Not legends this time, but warnings. There's a Mi'kmaq tale about a place where the forest forgets its own name. A place where time folds and travelers return, aged, grey-haired, or don't return at all. They call it Namkatuk roughly, the place that watches. The phrasing is precise. Not a place you watch, but a place that watches you. One line sticks with you. They brought noise. The land returned silence. You start seeing patterns, across continents, across millennia. In the Orkney, standing stones found to emit low vibrations at dusk. In Patagonia, a cave where whispers echo before you speak. In Siberia, a village buried in snow, every trace of life intact, meals, uneaten firewood stacked except for the people. Gone. Not a footprint out. Always the same arrival, contact, vanishment, and always the sound. You get a package, no sender. Inside a USB drive, a frayed Norse-style bracelet and a handwritten note. The note says, "I found it." Not gone, just hiding. You were right. You plug in the drive. A single audio file. 32 seconds. At first it's static, then wind, then something that shifts. You feel it before you hear it. A vibration in your jaw. a pressure in your skull, then the voice. Not words, just syllables layered, reversed impossibly low, like breath drawn through stone, like something trying to imitate human speech, but failing. You rip out your headphones. Your ears ring for hours. That night you dream again. A ring of trees, something huge moving between them, and a shape on the shore staring back at you. It has no eyes, but it sees you. When you wake, the USB drive is gone. You try to tell yourself it never existed, that you're just overworked, sleep-deprived, chasing ghosts, but the scratch on your palm where the bracelet rested still bleeds, and then you hear it again. Not through speakers, not from a file, from the wind outside your window, the same rhythm, the same breath. And you remember what one of the old maps said in the margin, beware the land that speaks, because maybe Vinland didn't vanish, maybe it was sealed, and maybe someone or something just opened it again. You stay indoors for 3 days, no updates, no messages. You leave your phone off, you unplug your router, but at night, the electricity flickers anyway. On the third morning, there's an envelope slipped under your door. No address, just one sentence, they never left. Inside is a photocopy of a 1947 Canadian military report declassified in heavy red stamp. The document describes an aerial reconnaissance mission over a forested region of Newfoundland. The pilot reported geometric vegetation patterns inconsistent with known flora behavior and a circular depression 31 meters in diameter emitting rhythmic radio interference. The plane malfunctioned mid-transmission. No wreckage was found. Only this page remains. The rest of the file is gone. Not redacted, erased. The archive entry ends in static. You call a contact, former military, specialized in Arctic surveillance. You ask him about magnetic anomalies, radio interference, spatial distortions. He goes quiet, then says, "Don't ask again," and hangs up. That night you notice something new, a change in your reflection. It's subtle, barely perceptible. Your movements lag behind. Your eyes don't blink at the same time. When you lean closer, your breath fogs the mirror, but not the reflections. You smash the glass. The reflection keeps smiling until the last shard falls. You find a forum, not on the open web. A buried fragment Vinland wake, hidden behind layers of obfuscation. Only 6 members, all anonymous. They share field notes, blurry images, encrypted audio sketched, diagrams of resonance loops, and non-Euclidean clearing formations. One member, Cedra7, posts a phrase, "Stone remembers blood, soil remembers name." Another replies, "It's happening again." They reference the return, a time cycle, not random, calculated, every 523 years. The last spike was 1002 AD, the year Leif Erikson supposedly reached Vinland. The next is now. And then you see it, a photo, grainy black and white, timestamp 1911, a Norwegian expedition, 5 men all armed. Behind them, the same circle of stones from the 2004 photo, identical, same angle, same shadows, same carved tree, but this time there's someone else in the background, blurred, tall, elongated, barefoot. No one mentions it. No one acknowledges the figure. You run image analysis, compare the two, align lighting, shadows, angles, and find one impossible truth. The 2 photos were taken at the exact same time of day, on the exact same date, 93 years apart, which means the place didn't change. Time did. You dig further. A 17th century priest diary, illegible mostly. One translated sentence, "I prayed in Latin." It replied in a tongue not meant for men. A Victorian explorer's field notes from Labrador. The trees stood still. The birds made no sound. I found a path not made by feet. I left a candle burning. It was gone in one breath. And then you find it. An ancient Norse charm, designed not to protect the traveler, but to bind the path. The rune is drawn in blood, encircled by a phrase in Old Norse. Let none return unchanged. You realize what this is. Vinland was not a colony. It was a containment. They weren't settling. They were trapping something. Something old, something hungry. And now, across the world, similar patterns emerge. A missing hiker returns after 3 years, not a day older. A lighthouse keeper reports lights in the ocean that mimic stars but underwater. A linguist in Greenland speaks fluently in a dead dialect after a fever, then falls silent forever. An audio engineer in Quebec goes deaf after recording forest tones. His final words were, "It called my name in my mother's voice." You begin hearing the tones in your sleep. You wake with soil beneath your fingernails. Your GPS app begins suggesting one route every day, always toward the same coastal region. No matter where you are, you delete it. It reinstalls itself. You start dreaming of the stone circle, not seeing it, standing in it, and you're not alone. Something stands with you just behind your shoulder. You never look back. You can't look back, but you feel it lean in and whisper something in a tongue older than breath. One morning, you wake up and find a stone in your bed, cold, carved, with your name on it. You begin to understand Vinland isn't a city. It's a place between, a threshold, and someone opened the door. You stop asking questions, not because you no longer care, but because now you understand the price of knowing. You stay awake for days. You leave the lights on, salt every doorway, tape mirrors, muffle sounds. Still, it hums and a resonance low and constant, buried in your bones. Not in the ears, beneath them. A pressure like standing on the ocean floor while someone whispers above. You try to destroy your research, burn your notes, smash the hard drives. But the data replicates. Images reappear. Logs restore themselves. One night, you wake to find your wall painted with symbols. You live alone, and on your ceiling, the Vinland ring perfectly drawn in soot. Weeks pass. You retreat from the world until one night your inbox pings. Cedar 7 has sent you a message. No subject line, no greeting. Just a set of coordinates and one question. Do you remember your other name? You hesitate. You shouldn't go. You know this, but part of you already left, so you follow it. The journey is long. Fog clings to the highway like skin. Your compass spins erratically. Your phone displays no signal even though the battery is full and the screen keeps flashing, "Welcome back." You reach the coast. A bay, still, grey. The trees lean inward like they're listening. And there it is. Not a city, not ruins, nothing man-made. Just a patterned circles of standing stones spiraling inward. Shapes in the moss, shapes in the air. The earth pulls. You enter. It doesn't feel like stepping into a place. It feels like falling into a memory that was never yours. Or maybe it was. Inside the ring, time changes. Your breath slows. Your heart echoes like a drum in a hollow sky. And then you remember. You were here before. Not in this life. Not in this body. But once you stood in this circle, as the sky cracked open, and something vast looked through you. Something that wasn't a god, but was worshipped anyway. You realize Vinland never disappeared. It was never meant to be found, because it never left. It simply waited. waited for memory to fade, for silence to rot the names, for one soul yours to return, because you weren't a scholar, you weren't a survivor, you weren't an investigator. You were the last key, the final seal, and your curiosity unlocked the gate. Far away across the earth, others feel it. A child in Denmark dreams of black ships returning to shore. A man in Siberia digs a hole and finds a staircase that descends forever. A woman in Scotland weeps in her sleep, clutching a name she's never heard before. They are waking, not people, not places. The memories, the echoes, the pieces of what once was and will be again. Because Vinland is not history, it is recurrence. A loop, a ritual. It never ended. It was only waiting for the right voice to speak the words again. And you already said them. In your dreams, in your research, in your questions. Now the circle is complete, and behind you, something steps through. You turn, you look, and for the first time, you see it clearly. Vinland, not a place, not a legend, but the name of the thing that remembers. And now, so do you. Welcome, midnight listeners. Tonight, we drift into a chapter of history that most would rather forget. A cobbled street, early summer. The town of Strasbourg lies warm beneath a thick sky. The river Ill moves sluggishly like breath caught in a throat. And in the heat, there is a woman, alone, moving. Her feet strike the stone not with joy, not with rhythm, but with something deeper, something helpless. She dances, yet her face does not smile. This is not a fable. This is not legend. It is recorded inked into the chronicles of 1518. A woman named Frau Trophea steps out from her home and begins to dance. No music plays. No festival has begun. The townspeople watch as her arms flail in jagged circles, as her hair darkens with sweat, as her bare feet smack against the stones long after the sun retreats behind the cathedral. They watch at first with laughter, nervous curiosity. Perhaps she is drunk, perhaps possessed. Strasbourg has seen both before. You listen to the gossip rising with the evening mist. Someone claims she was cursed. Someone else whispers about a penance, a saint's madness, a witch's guilt. But as night folds in and the woman continues, the mood tightens. She does not eat. She does not rest. She does not answer when called. By the second day, her body should have collapsed, but it doesn't. You watch her jaw move like she's muttering prayers or names or pleas. A priest sprinkles holy water from a distance, more frightened than pious. And when dawn breaks again, the woman is still there, her gown torn and clinging, her feet red and wet. Dancing. You think of demons, of humors, of divine punishment. Your own feet feel suddenly heavy, as if anchoring you against something you don't understand. And then, on the third day, another joins her. A boy of no more than 13. Then an older man. Then a mother. She still wears an apron dusted with flour. One by one, they step into the square and begin to mimic her movements. Their expressions don't shift. Their eyes shine with panic. Their legs move with hunger. Some sob while they twirl. Others grind their teeth and moan without words. No one tells them to stop. How could they? No one knows if stopping is possible. Before we drift deeper, consider marking this video for those who fall asleep best beside forgotten truths. Subscribe if you return nightly to the quiet horror of history. Let me know your local time, and if you're still awake at the end. Now exhale and let history's cold breath settle on your skin. The town begins to change shape. Merchants hang damp cloth over their stalls to block the sight. A carpenter's apprentice runs into a pillar and breaks his nose while staring. You hear the blacksmith mutter the word pestilence. You hear a mother whisper Saint Vitus. You begin to hear drums not of festivity, but from deep within your own ribs, your own pulse. Historians still wonder whether it was mass hysteria or poison in the rye or something stranger older, a spiritual sickness, an ancient echo. No one agrees. But the records agree on this: it was not one dancer. It was dozens. And the first one, she never stopped. Not that anyone saw her die. One day she was there whirling, the next gone. Some say she collapsed and was carried away. Others say she dissolved into the rhythm itself like salt in water. Her name stays on the page, but her end does not. You find that the music, though still absent, is louder now. The authorities begin to panic. Strasbourg was no stranger to disease, famine, or the madness of holy visions. But this was a sickness that danced. It mocked all categories. It didn't blister the skin, or swell the tongue, or rot the eyes. No, this disease smiled. It twirled. It raised its arms to the heavens and spun in defiance of sleep, food, and death. By the end of the week, over 30 people are dancing. Some bleed from their feet. Some collapse only to rise again minutes later, trembling, gasping, and moving once more. And now the city leaders, men of books, trade, and scripture must answer the question that hovers in every citizen's throat like a splinter. What is happening? The physicians step forward first. They speak of overheated blood, of hot humors that must be released. Their prescription is unthinkable but sincere. Let them dance. They demand the city provide a space, even a stage. Somewhere they can dance more freely until the sickness burns out of them. The council listens and agrees. The city erects a platform in the market square. Musicians are hired, drummers, pipers, even professional dancers. They gather to play, hoping the rhythms will carry the afflicted to some finish line, death perhaps, or cure. You stand nearby watching a man in rags collapse, foam at the mouth, and then crawl to his feet and begin swaying again to a tune that has not paused. It feels somehow like watching a heresy performed live, a sacred illness met with a festive response. You feel your own toes twitch. You clutch them tight in your boots. Weeks pass. The heat thickens. The river begins to stink. And the number of dancers grows. By late July, nearly 400 people are dancing in Strasbourg. And now, they begin to die. Heart attacks, exhaustion, blood loss. Some fall mid-movement and do not rise. Others burst vessels in their legs. Some simply vanish. You hear rumors now whispered through shutters and behind candlelit altars, that a nun began dancing in her convent, that a child danced into the river, that 2 musicians joined the beat and now cannot stop playing. Their hands bleed, their eyes do not blink, but their flutes still rise and fall, rising in pitch, even as their breath shortens. And in the square beneath the melting sun, the stage becomes a grave. The city leaders reverse their plan. The music is silenced, the stage dismantled. The dancers are rounded up, carted away to the shrine of St. Vitus, the patron saint of epileptics, lunatics, and dancers. They are prayed over, bled, fed spiced wine and holy bread, and still some of them dance. You pass a girl in the street, no older than 8. She turns toward you, eyes glassy, arms twitching, and you wonder, how close is the edge? Could it happen to you? Could a single footstep, one misstep tip you into the rhythm? Could your own body in secret already be tuning itself to that silent music. Today scholars call it mass psychogenic illness. They blame ergot fungus or starvation or collective trauma. But none of them can explain the grace of it. The structure. The chorus of limbs that moved like they had trained their whole lives for a concert no one could hear. They can't explain why it happened again in nearby towns, or why no one danced before or after in quite that way. They can't explain why to this day when some people stand too long in silence, they begin to sway. You enter the makeshift hall, its wooden planks stained with sweat and dust. Torches line the walls, flickering against the stone, casting everyone's faces into hollow masks. The physicians stand before you men in velvet robes, with powdered wigs, eyebrows raised in pale concern. They hold their charts, each scroll listing the afflicted by name, age, and the hour they first began to dance. You listen as they speak not of plague, but of humor. Your blood is aflame. They announce, voices calm, measured. Only motion can stoke the fires toward exhaustion and healing. They nod to the musicians, men with flutes and drums brought from the far reaches of Alsace. The rhythm begins again, steady as a heartbeat, although no one beats a drum when they breathe. You watch as the afflicted step forward, one by one, into this new arena. A blacksmith's daughter, a baker's apprentice, a former militiaman whose left leg is already bruised purple, all compelled now to join the procession of bodies. They form a ring around the physicians who place their hands upon a small altar, a carved statue of St. Vitus, patron saint of this strange disorder. The priests chant in Latin from a distance, words you don't understand, but feel pressing against your mind like an unspoken command. The physicians direct the dancers to begin slowly to ease into their movements. But the dancers never ease. Their torsos arch back, their lungs heave, and their arms carve the air in desperate arcs. The lead physician declares this, the therapeutic dance, a ritual embraced by royalty in Italy and France, though never on this scale. You recall reading that King Charles IV once mandated court dancers to move for days to ward off similar fevers, yet none died then. Here bodies buckle under a sun that burns through skirts and doublets. You feel the temperature rise though it's night, and the air tastes of fear. A woman in front of you whispers that they've spiced the town's wine with an herb ergot, known in ancient texts to induce convulsions and visions. Some blame it for causing early fits in German villages centuries before. Others dismiss the idea as superstition. Historians still wonder whether ergot poisoning was to blame for the dancing plague, or if it was something else, something that cannot be documented in grain or church record. The drums accelerate. You sense each beat pulling at your chest, urging you forward, tempting you to stand and move. A man collapses at your feet, his limbs twisting on the ground. The physicians leap forward, examining his pulse, nodding gravely, then stepping back as he rises again, unhurt but shaking, and continues to dance. You glance at your own watch, if you still have one, and note that hours have blurred into days. The physicians keep meticulous time, 4 days, 10 hours, 20 minutes. They measure and label every moment as if that will tame the madness. A chilling fact steals through your mind. At least one local musician hired to play for healing purposes snapped a string on his fiddle and placed it into his mouth, biting down until his jaw cracked just to escape the unbearable rhythm. He stayed, blood trickling onto his shirt, moving his head in time with the tune. No one stopped him. You shift away, your boots echoing, and notice that the physicians have begun a new ritual. They raise small silver cups. Each dancer is offered a sip, an elixir of spiced wine vinegar and ground radish. They call it heat queller. Some refuse. Others knock back a full goblet and resume moving as if newly energized. A respected apothecary's son drinks deeply, staggers, and then laughs a sound uneven as broken glass before rejoining the swirl. You feel a tremor through the floor. It is not from the dancers. It is from the statues overhead, carved angels whose stone wings catch the torchlight as though they might take flight. The ceilings tremble. No one mentions it, not even the physicians. You recall that in 1580, an aftershock from an alpine earthquake caused walls in nearby villages to buckle. Historians still wonder whether a similar tremor in July 1518 subtly influenced the town's collective psyche, leaving them more susceptible to mass hysteria. The silence on the subject is deafening. The physicians continue unflinching. They consult one another over the afflicted, counting heartbeats, mapping sweat patterns, adjusting drums' tempo. They argue quietly whether introducing an organ's low moan might calm the fever or fan it. They decide it's worth trying. Soon an organist is escorted in his fingers, trembling as they press the keys. A deep, keening hum joins the drums. The dancers pivot toward the sound, their steps slowing, then accelerating as if the organ itself is a hidden conductor beckoning to their limbs. You feel your own reflection in a darkened window pane. Your eyes are heavy, your jaw clenched. Without realizing, you begin to sway softly until you're nearly pulled into the ring. You grip the window frame to steady yourself. The physicians note this. One scribbles in his ledger. Observer nearly afflicted by proximity. He adjusts his spectacles and moves on. In the far corner, a whispered rumor spreads that the elixir contains a rare seed from the Ottoman Empire smuggled through traders. They say this seed can warp the Vinland, open channels to other states of being. Another subtle horror. No one can agree who first introduced it or how it entered Strasbourg's cellars. The town's grain merchants, always precise in their ledgers, have no record of such a commodity. Historians still wonder whether the spice routes themselves shielded darker trades involving substances never spoken of in polite company. The organ's final chord shivers through the hall. The physicians nod and signal the musicians to halt. A hush descends. You notice the dancers, some collapsed, some still moving, and realize that nearly half have perished, heart failure, exhaustion, internal hemorrhage. Others kneel, gasping sweat clearing into a sheen of blood and prayer. The physicians approach, each patting shoulders, whispering blessings. They ask if more dancing is needed. No one speaks. At last the lead physician raises his hand. A single gesture. The crowd parts. He speaks in a voice you almost don't register. It is done. And the musicians, stoned or spent, tremble, then lower their instruments. The dancers, freed, stand or fall away into trembling heaps. You step forward, past the fallen, past the bodies being dragged away by apprentices in tears. You catch sight of a single shoe, worn and cracked, left spinning slowly on the plank. The physicians close their books. They tuck their charts under arms and leave the hall, leaving you with the dancers alive or dead, you cannot be sure. The music has never truly stopped. You hear its echo in your own heartbeat. You walk away carrying the weight of something irreversible, that the cure was worse than the sickness, because it demanded more of the body than it could ever give. And still some insist it worked. Historians still wonder whether Strasbourg's therapeutic dance inspired similar events in Aachen and Lübeck the following year. The debate is ongoing, the records fragmentary. Some claim those occurrences were simply copycats drawn by rumor. Others whisper that those towns too had to conquer something lurking in their own stones. You step into the open air. The night is silent now, Too silent, your ears ring with the absence of drums. You rub your arms, but your skin still tingles with residual rhythm. In the distance, you imagine someone beginning to sway, and the music still unheard follows you home. You wake before dawn, haunted by a steady thrum behind your eyelids. It's not a dream. It's memory of the drums. You dress by candlelight and step into the empty square where the hall once stood. The stones lie bare, marred only by dark stains and one long scratch across the flagstones where a dancer's nail was torn free. The market appears abandoned. Stalls sag under moth-eaten tarps. You feel the absence of life pressing against your skin. In the distance, the cathedral bells toll once an hour, now more erratic, as though struggling against something. In the days after the therapeutic dance, the square became a tableau of emptiness. The town's musicians vanished, some fled in terror, others found dead at their homes, faces contorted in silent lament. Historians still wonder whether they were slain by angry mobs or simply returned to where no one could hear them play. You move toward the mayor's house. He's locked himself inside, refusing to speak. They say he watched from a window as the last dancer collapsed and then staggered away into a nearby vineyard, never to be seen again. A carriage awaits him there, always empty as door, swinging as if expecting a passenger. A child's shoe lies on the steps, dusty, unclaimed. You pick it up and feel the weight of it, small leather, worn smooth by frantic gliding across the stones. You place it back, aligning the toe with the edge of a step, as though offering it a new purpose. The sudden creak of a door echoes. An apprentice blacksmith emerges, his face hollow, his arms bound in cloth. He holds a small wooden token, a dancer's figurine carved with the likeness of Saint Vitus. Its features are indistinct, smoothed by too many hands seeking comfort. He places it at your feet and whispers, "They danced for days, until the river froze." He turns and walks away, each step measured as though guiding his body past some invisible music. You remain watching his silhouette absorb into the mist rising from the riverbank. You wander to the cathedral, its doors open despite the hour. Inside, candles burn low and pews sit empty. You climb to the pulpit where the priest once prayed for deliverance. On the floor below, a single drumstick lies across a Bible, its wood worn and splintered. Your fingertips pass over the grain. You feel a pressure in your chest, the memory of music distant but not gone. A psalm is inscribed in the margin of the Bible, written in a quivering hand. The body moves when the soul cannot rest. No author is named, no date, just the thin script bleeding into the margin. You trace the letters and feel their chill. You leave the cathedral and head toward the river. The Ill is black in the pre-dawn gloom, its surface still except for faint ripples. Along the bank, you find footprints bare and dripping. The mud cradles them as though reluctant to let them go. They lead to a small wooden raft, half sunken, tethered by a single rope. You follow the rope. It leads upstream into a tangle of reeds, to a clearing where the stones of a long-forgotten dance ring emerge. Moss-covered, broken in places, yet unmistakable, a circle of slate, edged by worn grooves where boots once spun. No walls, no roof, just a ring in the earth. You step inside. The air changes, thickens, tightens. You smell it, then sweat, wood smoke, and something like fear distilled into air. You recall the blacksmith's daughter, the baker's apprentice, the militiaman. They all passed through circles like this. They all left something behind. You crouch and find a small pile of items, a broken tambourine, a torn sleeve embroidered with a crest. No longer recognized. And one dancer's token, a ring of twisted metal cold as bloodless iron. You hold it up. It hums in your palm, a vibration that slips beneath your skin. You try to drop it, but your fingers tighten. A voice low and distant speaks your name. No sound escapes the reeds, yet you hear it. You look around. There is no one. Only the river, the stones, and the weight of expectation. You place the ring back. Your hand hovers over it, reluctant. The sun breaks the horizon, and rays pierce the mist in slanted beams. The ring's hum ceases. The clearing falls silent, too silent. You feel your pulse in that silence, a drum you cannot stop. You stand brushing mud from your knees. You walk away guided by unseen hands toward the town and the life that should await you, though nothing feels the same. You still smell the rot from Section 2, another reminder that some places keep their secrets in bone and stone. And in your pocket the leather shoe trembles faintly, as if remembering the steps it once carried. You don't remember returning home, but you wake in your bed fully clothed, boots caked in dried mud. Your hands ache the way they might after gripping a stranger too long. The candle on your nightstand has melted into a soft puddle. You didn't light it. Someone did. Outside the town stirs. You hear no laughter, no carts. Just slow footsteps on cobblestone and the faint tap-tap-tap of a walking stick, or a rhythm starting to form. In your mirror, you catch something odd your face. Still yours, but different. Your eyes twitch slightly, not from fatigue, but from restraint. Like something inside them wants to keep dancing. You step into the street. No one looks at you, but all seem to know you've seen the circle. An old woman clutches her prayer beads faster when you pass. A child hides a wooden toy under his coat. You hear snippets from their whispers. He was near it. That's how it starts. The town won't take another. You reach the outskirts to the mill house where the last survivor now lives. A young girl, then now a grown woman, who speaks to no one. You knock. No answer. But the door opens. She's there, seated by the hearth, rocking slowly, lips moving in silence. On the floor beside her, a journal, its pages ragged and ink smeared. She motions you to read. You pick it up. The writing is frantic but clear enough. They said it was illness, a curse. But it wasn't. It was joy. Too much joy all at once. Not a feeling from within, but a pressure forced in. Like your soul is being inflated with noise. And when it bursts, your body just keeps moving. Another page, I saw one man laugh until his lungs collapsed. He tried to stop. We all did. But something played us. We weren't dancers. We were instruments. You lower the journal. She's still rocking, eyes closed, mouthing a rhythm you can't hear. But your foot begins to tap, just slightly. Once, then again. You will it to stop. It doesn't. You back out of the room. She doesn't move. Not toward you. Not toward the world. She stays locked in whatever song was started that summer. Outside, the sky has darkened unnaturally. A storm, but without thunder, just a deep, pulsing wind. It rises and falls in a tempo. Everything feels scored, choreographed. You feel watched, not by eyes, but by intention. Something aware, something old. You flee to the chapel on the hill, the one that was abandoned during the outbreak. You push through its warped doors and find the choir loft still intact. Sheet music lies scattered across the floor, notes rewritten with unfamiliar glyphs. One page bears a crude drawing, a circle of dancers, hands linked, but above them no stars. Just an open mouth. You hear footsteps below, but you see no one. Then the bells toll again, of tempo clashing, as though rung by different hands fighting for rhythm. You descend the tower stairs and burst into the graveyard. Every headstone bears a name you don't recognize. Then one does your own. The date of death is today. You kneel. The grave is not yet dug, but it is marked. And around it, someone has laid a ring of broken fiddles, their strings tied in knots. You hear music, not from an instrument, from within. A single note rising like steam behind your eyes. You clamp your hands over your ears, but it's not outside. It's already inside. You run, back into town, through streets that bend at unfamiliar angles. People watch you now not with pity, but with distance. They know. They've seen it before. You collapse against a wall. Across from you, a child begins to spin slowly, innocently, the way children do when they're happy. But the spin continues. Too long, too fast. Her eyes widen. Her mouth opens, but no sound escapes. The townsfolk freeze, then begin to back away. The child's mother screams once, then vanishes into the crowd. You rise. You know what's coming. You've read the signs, heard the echoes. The music has found its next vessel. It always does. And now it's moving again. Not through voices, through rhythm. You walk home where the candle burns again despite your absence. You sit. You wait. And you pray that the song forgets your name. You don't leave your house anymore. Not since that night. You keep the shutters closed, the floor bare, and the clocks unwound. No ticking, no tapping. You eat in silence. You sleep when your body allows. You whisper to no one, not even yourself. Because even the rhythm of breath, if noticed, can become a pattern. And patterns you've learned can be invitations. But the town does not forget. The circle has returned. You see it in the way the crows fly, not scattered, but orbiting. In the way puddles ripple without wind. In the way people speak phrases repeated not out of habit, but as if chanted. Quietly, obediently. You once heard a preacher say that order was divine, that harmony was holy. But now you wonder, what if chaos was the only protection? What if it was never the dancers who summoned the force, but the music itself searching for orderly vessels? Your hands still twitch in sleep. Sometimes you wake with your fingers flexed as if plucking strings. You no longer dream of people, only of rooms filled with movement steps repeating endlessly. You wake sweating, heart racing to an unknown meter. You've moved the furniture. Every day in random ways. You sleep in different places. You brush your teeth with your left hand. You try not to walk in straight lines. You no longer speak in full sentences. But still, you hear it. Distant, subtle, as if from the ground itself. A faint tap, tap, tap. You once tried to record it, left out a reel-to-reel mic set to max. You played it back. Silence at first, then a voice. Not yours. It whispered, "You danced once. That is enough." You burned the tape. The next day, someone left a gift at your door. A box wrapped in cloth stitched with ancient notes, notation without melody. Inside a single shoe worn through at the toe, blood-soaked, but dried long ago. You buried it, far away. But that night your foot cramped into a pointed arch, as if drawn toward motion, as if remembering. The next week the baker vanished, no signs of struggle, just her apron tied neatly on her door. The week after the blacksmith, his anvil ringing once at midnight though the forge was cold. The mayor posted signs offering rewards, but no one investigates too deeply. They remember what you all saw. Some say it started in the mines, others with a cursed song carried from the east. But you've read the old records, those they tried to destroy. It's older, much older. Some called it the laughing plague, others the joy curse. But the oldest name scratched into the cellar wall of an abbey long lost was simple. the rhythm without mercy. A force that does not kill. It compels. Until the body collapses or the mind shatters, you've learned to resist, to starve it of symmetry. But one night you slip, just once. You hum a lullaby your mother used to sing, and it answers, a sound behind the sound, a harmony no ear should know. Your vision blurs, your fingers twitch again. This time not with fear but with longing. You clutch your chest, because you're not scared. You're remembering how good it felt, to lose control, to be part of the whole, to move without self, to become music. You fall to the floor, not convulsing but swaying, not in pain, in rhythm. Your eyes close. You mouth the final words of the hymn, not yours, not hers, its. Then outside your house for the first time in weeks, a child laughs. Then two, then a dozen. The townsfolk watch silently, horror in their eyes, because they know the circle has begun again. And this time, there will be no survivors. Welcome, midnight listeners. Tonight we drift into a chapter of history that most would rather forget. A lone lantern dims in a courtyard of polished marble and lacquered wood. You trace its trembling glow across columns carved with dragons, each scale frozen in mid-roar. The air is thick with incense and the weight of unspoken expectation. You imagine the eyes of ancestors watching from the carved screens, eyes that once judged every breath of the boy seated upon the dragon throne. Before we drift deeper, consider marking this video for those who fall asleep, best beside forgotten truths. Subscribe if you return nightly to the quiet horror of history. Let me know your local time, and if you're still awake at the end. Now exhale and let history's cold breath settle on your skin. You stand in the Hall of Supreme Harmony, though no harmony remains. It is November of the year of the rabbit, 1908. A child not yet 2 years old is led forward by eunuchs. His robes sweep the jade floor. His tiny hands graze the jeweled sphere, and scepter placed before him as symbols of heaven's mandate. The court ministers murmur protocol, but you hear only the child's breath, quick and uncertain. He is predestined to inherit an empire older than most dynasties. You watch his crown lowered onto his head, too large, too heavy for his neck. He does not cry. He cannot speak. Yet the empire expects him to embody centuries of unbroken rule. The major truth emerges in the centuries prior. No emperor had ever been sworn in so young. Tradition demanded an adult's wisdom. And so, you wonder whether any mandate held meaning when vested in a child. During the ceremony, a minister steps forward to read the edict. His voice echoes through the high ceiling. The Son of Heaven ascends. But you note the silence that answers him. Not reverence fear, a fear born of knowing that a throne without authority is merely an empty gesture. You still smell the resin from the incense burners, sweet and cloying, seared into the memory of every witness. Scholars still wonder whether Priya even comprehended the ritual or simply reacted to the soft tremor of silk against marble. Historical accounts conflict. Some claim he giggled when the dragon's claws glinted in torchlight. Others insist he stiffened, staring at his reflection in the polished brass basin. No record can confirm which image is truest. After the robes are drawn closed and the edict sealed, the boy is carried away to the inner court. The doors close, leaving the hall empty. You remain. You sense the hush that settled over Beijing, an entire city holding its breath at the thought of a ruler who could neither speak nor walk without assistance. Outside the forbidden city, the world teeters on collapse. Anti-imperial sentiments stir like wind-driven leaves. The commoners whisper of revolution in tea houses. Newspapers in Shanghai print subversive pamphlets. Yet inside the walls, life continues as if time has leaned against these marble pillars and refused to move. You glimpse the first unsettling detail in the months after the enthronement. Puyi's meals were served on porcelain, so thin it chipped at the slightest tilt. The court doctors prescribed powdered pearls to strengthen his bones and prevent premature death, a costly remedy reflecting the dynasty's desperation. Yet no physician could guarantee the child's survival. Death by palace intrigue, disease, or neglect hovered nearer than the distant threat of revolution. This documented truth gnaws at you, an empire more preoccupied with ceremonial opulence than the health of its youngest sovereign. You leave the hall and enter the narrow corridors of the inner court, where silence deepens. You pass under painted eaves that drip in shadow. The eunuchs glide past their pale faces, devoid of expression. Behind lacquered screens, concubine Jen watches. She strokes the boy's hair, but never smiles. Historians still wonder whether her affection was genuine or part of a calculated effort to secure influence, whether she truly mourned the circus of ritual or only her own faded power. At dusk, you reach the imperial study. Scrolls line the shelves unopened. An ivory brush rests on a stone ink slab unused for decades. You pick it up and feel its chill. The weight of every unanswered question bears upon you. What name did the boy give himself beyond his titles? What childhood dreams flickered behind his dark eyes before he understood betrayal or exile? A bell tolls from the Hall of Supreme Harmony, an echo of that first ceremony, though no one remains to mark its passage. You note a subtle horror. The clockwork mechanism beneath the bell had been carved from sandalwood and silk threads. It ticked once each year on his birthday, reminding the court that time continued despite the dynasty's heartbeat weakening. You step back into the courtyard. The lantern guttering in the wind throws dancing shadows across the pavilion. You realize the greatest terror is not the boy emperor's fate, but the empire's. An empire that crowned a child because no ordinary adult could secure its survival. A realm built on obedience now held by a ruler who owed obedience to none. The wind carries the faint strains of a lute from the far corner, an accidental note echoing off the walls. It slips beneath your skin, stirring something you cannot name. You shiver, half in reverence, half in dread, for the weight of history settles upon your shoulders. The dynasty's breath grows thinner with each passing moment, yet still the rituals persist. You breathe again. The empire's hush deepens, and you know the child has inherited more than titles. He has inherited the silence that follows the last gasp of a world. You open your eyes, and it's the year 1912. Snow settles gently on the crimson roofs of the Forbidden City. Somewhere beyond its massive walls, the Republic of China has just been declared. But inside it is still the Qing dynasty. Still dragon robes and kowtows, still rules that govern how one should weep in the presence of an emperor who is now legally nothing. At just 6 years old, Puyi is told that he is no longer the ruler of China, but no one dares speak the truth aloud. They continue to bow. They continue to call him Your Majesty. They continue the mourning rituals even as warlords carve the country into fiefdoms and revolutionaries fill the streets with ink and rifles. The only sound you hear in the palace is the brushing of silk slippers across stone and the occasional cough from a eunuch growing old in irrelevance. This is a world in denial. A letter arrives from the new republic, sealed and formal. The emperor is to abdicate, but they offer a strange courtesy. Puyi may stay in the Forbidden City for now. He may retain his title as a ceremonial relic. He is for all intents and purposes a museum exhibit still breathing. You trace the absurdity like a finger on cold glass. Here is a child still learning his characters being made to sign away a dynasty with an ink-stained thumbprint. The grown men around him weep. Not for the boy, not really, but for themselves. For their pensions, for their fading positions, for the decades they spent mastering rituals that now mean nothing. You walk past a gathering of court officials performing their morning bows, 81 full prostrations just as before. But now their eyes are red, their movements stiff not from reverence but grief. Outside gunfire crackles somewhere in the city. Inside the emperor is being taught how to sit properly on a throne that no longer rules. His tutor, Sir Reginald Johnston, a stiff-lipped Scotsman, with a pocket watch and a classical education, is introduced soon after. Johnston is horrified by the medieval cruelty of the palace boys being castrated for court service food tasters, still required to sample meals for poison, and guards who believe mirrors can trap evil spirits. And yet, he grows fond of the boy because beneath the dragon embroidery and ritual bows, Puyi is a frightened, brilliant child with no real power. You step into his private quarters. Here the boy emperor collects clocks, dozens of them ticking endlessly, unsynchronized. He insists they all be wound daily. When asked why, he says simply, "So I'll know time is still moving." You note this: no other Chinese ruler in history lived in such temporal confusion. No longer emperor, not yet a commoner trapped between dynasty and republic. And you see the cost. Puyi begins to lash out. He orders eunuchs beaten for minor errors. He throws tantrums that last hours. He steals food from the kitchens, even when it's not hunger that drives him. He dreams of battles he will never fight. His psychologist later writes, he behaved less like a sovereign and more like a caged bird that had once flown in someone else's dream. Then comes the horror that defines the palace's slow collapse one night. Suspecting theft, he commands his guards to search the eunuch's quarters. Dozens of terrified old men are rounded up. Their meager belongings, worn robes, paper fans, charms are ripped apart. One is found with a silver hairpin belonging to the late Empress Dowager. Puyi orders him flogged in the courtyard. The man screams, then dies from shock. Puyi is 7. He watches silent. The court records do not erase the event. In fact, they record it precisely down to the hour. 7th year of the Emperor Xuantong, 3rd month, 9th day. Cold wind. 23 lashes. Death recorded. It's a clinical note filed beside birthday poems and imperial edicts that no longer hold legal power. You walk now through the garden of benevolent tranquility, silent, frostbitten, empty of visitors. Once a place for imperial consorts to stroll, now only dry leaves rustle. Somewhere inside the palace, Johnston tries to introduce him to bicycles, to the works of Shakespeare, to modern maps. But it's a strange pairing modernity introduced through the lens of a fading monarchy. The emperor learns English, but still dresses each morning in silken robes embroidered with phoenixes. He is told he is both everything and nothing, and the mind begins to fracture. You read diary fragments later in his life, dark, disjointed entries. One reads simply, "I dreamed I was a tiger, but when I roared, only dust came out." You recognize the quiet terror of that line. A being born to power but raised in ceremonial emptiness. An identity constructed from incense smoke and obsolete hierarchies. You know now that no sword could have slain the Qing dynasty more cleanly than its own refusal to accept the end. And so the boy remains. A ruler of gardens, of clocks, of ghosts. At night, he wakes screaming, unable to breathe. He begs servants to open the doors wide, but none dare disobey tradition. An emperor must sleep behind closed panels, guarded against wind and evil spirits. He sleeps in suffocation. And somewhere in the distance, Beijing grows louder, hungrier, and more real. You wake now in Tianjin, 1925. Gone are the vermilion halls and bowing eunuchs. In their place, European streets, rickshaws clattering over cobblestones, and buildings painted in pale imitations of Paris and Vienna. This is the foreign concession, a ghost town of colonial ambition, and it has adopted a ghost of an emperor. Puyi is 20. He has not worked a day in his life. He has never used money. He has never opened a door for himself. And yet here he is, a former son of heaven, living in a rented Western-style mansion, surrounded by mirrors, foreign perfumes, Western suits, and the sharp scent of disillusionment. He drinks imported tea, hires a Russian bodyguards, and studies books on constitutional monarchies, because still, he believes the throne can be reclaimed. You walk past his desk. It is cluttered with sketches of new flags for a restored Qing state. In one version, 5 dragons twist around a flaming sun. In another, he's drawn himself larger than any celestial emblem. Each night, he holds private ceremonies, alone, re-anointing himself in a mirror. And his servants still call him Your Majesty, but with a tone that now borders on pity. He marries a noblewoman, Wonrong, who once dreamed of a Paris honeymoon. Instead, she becomes Empress of Nothing. She smokes opium in secret, writes sad poems in classical verse. Her diary contains a line that chills you. His dreams have no furniture, only walls. She is not speaking of literal dreams. She is speaking of a man who has no place to sit in any world past or future. And then Japan arrives. Their diplomats court him like a ghost-worshipping cult. They flatter him with promises of restoration. They feed his fantasies of imperial return. They whisper of Manchuria. It is 1931 when he makes the fatal choice. The Japanese carve Manchukuo out of the north with bombs and soldiers and crown. Puyi not as emperor, but as chief executive of the puppet state. He accepts. He boards the train wearing a ceremonial robe and steps off into a land he has never ruled, surrounded by men who smile too politely and bow too deeply. It is no coronation. It is an abduction in slow motion. The palace they build for him in Changchun is cold, sterile. Every room is bugged. His guards answer not to him, but to Tokyo. His orders must be approved. His letters read. His dreams watched. You stand at the door of his new throne room. There is no jade, no incense, no ancestral tablets, just a lacquered seat flanked by Japanese officers pretending to be secretaries. A general once says, he sits very well. That is his job. It is not a compliment. It is a summary. And the cruelty returns, but now it wears gloves. Executions are held in his name. Chinese rebels are shot. Villagers are sterilized. Experimentation camps open in the forests. And still, he signs the papers day after day, eyes empty, hands steady. When one aide asks if he understands the orders, Puyi says only, "It's not my country. I am only borrowing it." He has become the perfect puppet, obedient, ornamental, and empty. But even in this farce there is panic. He develops a fear of windows. He orders all curtains sealed. He starts wearing sunglasses indoors. He has 12 uniforms made each more elaborate than the last. He sleeps with a loaded pistol beside his bed but never touches it. He forbids his wife from leaving the compound. He becomes paranoid that his food is poisoned, that his guards are laughing at him. And they are. One day, a Japanese officer tells him as a joke, You should bow before the Emperor of Japan as you did to your ancestors. Puyi does. The officer laughs. So does the entire room. That night, he breaks every mirror in the palace. And you realize no emperor in Chinese history was ever humiliated so thoroughly, so slowly, and so willingly. One wrong his empress falls completely into opium. She bears a child by another man, whether lover or rapist history is unclear. The child is taken from her and dies shortly after birth. When she asks where her baby is, no one answers. She begins talking to herself, then to ghosts. Years later, she will die in a prison cell, mad alone, unburied. Puyi never asks what became of her. The war turns. Manchukuo collapses in 1945 under Soviet invasion. The palace is looted. Japanese officers flee. Puyi dons civilian clothes and tries to escape with a false identity, Mr. Zhang. He boards a plane, is intercepted and arrested by the Soviets. They ask his name. He hesitates, then says, "I don't know anymore." You are with him in a cold Siberian cell when he wakes screaming, not from fear but confusion. "Am I still the emperor?" he asks his guard. The man shrugs. "You're nobody here." And for the first time in his life, he believes it. You now find yourself in a prison cell in Fushun, northeast China. It is 1950. The People's Republic has been born from war and revolution. And here, within these concrete walls, they keep their strangest prisoner, not a warlord, not a general, but a ghost in a royal robe, Dioro Puyi, last emperor of the Qing dynasty, former puppet of Manchukuo, and now prisoner number 981. He is 44. He no longer demands anything. He no longer gives orders. He washes his own clothes by hand. He peels potatoes. He stands in line. He eats with chopsticks from a tin tray just like the others. His old habits die slow. At first, he still bows at doors, expects servants to clean his boots, flinches when spoken to too loudly. He still believes in thrones, still imagines the Manchukuo flag flying over Beijing. But here, the prison doesn't break him by torture. They do something worse. They make him ordinary. Every day for years, he is made to write out his thoughts. He must confess not just crimes, but illusions. The guards call it re-education. He calls it erasure. For hours, he must rewrite his life with each line bleeding the myth away. I am not a descendant of heaven. I was a tool of fascism. I harmed the Chinese people. I am no one. At first, he lies, performs, flatters. Then, he begins to believe. You see it when he stops flinching at the word comrade. You hear it when he calls Mao the people's leader without irony. You feel it when he no longer looks out the window, as if someone will come to rescue him. They finally succeeded. He is released in 1959 after 9 years. Not with ceremony, not with papers signed in dragon blood, but with a simple stamp and a handshake. Go live as a citizen, they tell him. He does. Puyi returns to Beijing now unrecognizable. No forbidden city, no banners of yellow silk, just grey concrete blocks, bicycles, party slogans. He is given a small room in a collective housing unit. He becomes a gardener. Yes, a gardener. The last emperor of China now waters flowers and trims hedges for the Botanical Institute of Beijing. And there is something almost beautiful in that if you squint. But don't. Keep your eyes open. Watch what happens. Every week he is paraded before students to confess again, like a circus relic. They laugh sometimes. Sometimes they applaud. Once a teenager throws a rock at him and yells, "Emperors killed my grandfather." He bows, says nothing. His co-workers are kind but curious. They ask what it was like to sit on the dragon throne. He says cold, very cold. In 1962, he writes a memoir. Not really his edited by party hands, scrubbed, polished, and made into a morality tale. From emperor to citizen, it is sold in train stations and schools. But you standing there holding a copy, you see what's missing. The opium, the laughing Japanese guards, the crying empress, the baby that vanished. None of that is in the book. And now you wait for the end. It's 1967. Puyi is 61 years old. The Cultural Revolution is beginning to sweep across China in a storm of red banners and broken icons. The Red Guards arrive. They beat professors, destroy antiques, burn books. And Puyi, they almost forget about him. Almost. One day, a group of teenage revolutionaries recognize him outside the botanical gardens. They chase him, yelling down with feudal remnants. He tries to run. Trips. His glasses shatter. They don't kill him. But they do humiliate him one last time. Cut his hair. Tear his clothes, make him shout, "I am not an emperor," over and over until his voice gives out. Days later, he is hospitalized for kidney cancer. And then he simply fades. No grand funeral, no tomb of jade. He dies in a hospital bed in 1967, buried in an unmarked grave, later moved to a modest public cemetery. A single line is carved on his stone, Aishin Juelo Puyi, citizen of the People's Republic of China. Not emperor, not king, not even traitor, just citizen. You close the story here, not with triumph, not with tragedy, but with something colder absorption. A man once believed to rule under heaven reduced to a gardener who couldn't even choose his own name. And you wonder which was worse, the throne, the prison, or the forgetting.